Yo, it's Go and welcome to the video. As you can see up there, there was a couple changes announced that are going to happen tomorrow for NA, Wednesday EU on the reset in Season of Discovery for us Balance Druids to pay attention to. First change is the natural weapons talent now increases all damage done by Druids in Season of Discovery instead of just physical damage. Let's look at that one first. So natural weapons is something that we used to kind of skip over because it didn't benefit us at all. They made a change to make Omen of Clarity work off of spells, so then all of a sudden it kind of gave us a benefit, but still felt bad spending 5 points just to get Omen of Clarity. Now our basic build that we can have is putting all the points into natural weapons, improved Moonfire, improved Wrath, improved Starfire, Vengeance. We can get our Nature's Grace, go through Moon Fury, and then get Moon Conform. And then there's 8 points left over that we can fill out whatever we want. So I always enjoy Nature's Reach. I will have 2 points there. And then if you don't have another Druid in your raid, then you could have Improved Mark of the Wild to buff your raid with that and still have 1 point left over. I like having my Nature's Grasp, so that's probably what I'll do, especially because I enjoy doing a lot of Battlegrounds. Sometimes I'm the only Druid in the Battleground. And even with all those points spent, I still have 1 extra talent point, so I don't know, I'll just maybe throw that in Improved Entangling Roots and call it a day. But natural weapons on its own increases the damage you deal with physical attacks in all forms by 10%. That should change to say all damage. And there's a little bit of confusion on, is it going to be base damage or is it going to be kind of like an extra Dark Moon Fair buff? And I think it's going to be Dark Moon Fair buff style, and I'll show you why. So if we look at Moon Fury on Wowhead and scroll down, you can see that it modifies spell effectiveness by 10%, and it has a bunch of spells listed. So if it were, this is the base damage for these spells. So we would expect to see the same thing if we go to natural weapons and look at that to have all the physical damage abilities that it would buff by 10% base damage. But when we go over to natural weapons, it just shows mod damage done percent physical. And this appears the same way that the Dark Moon Fair buff does, with a mod damage done percent, and then instead of physical only, it has every single spell damage school listed as well. So are they going to add Holy Frost Shadow? Is it just going to be Arcane, Nature, and Physical that we see on this change to natural weapons? Either way, I think this is how it'll work. It'll be 10% after spell power is applied instead of just the base damage of our spells. That's the first part. And then we have another change to Gale Wind's rune now reduces the mana cost of Hurricane by 60%. It used to reduce it by only 20%. So if we take our base mana cost of Hurricane at 1,180, subtract 60%, then Hurricane should cost 472 mana, which makes it very cheap, but still doesn't really do that much damage on AoE packs compared to other AoE classes. Both of these changes seem to be really good for PvP. I can see myself using Hurricane to try to bring out stealth, like rogues. If I see a rogue try to come at me and then hit stealth, I can throw a couple Hurricanes around to try to break it out of stealth and not completely go after 2 or 3 Hurricane casts. The trade-off for having Gale Winds, though, is not having improved bark skin, which improved bark skin in PvP is pretty fantastic to have, but it definitely makes Gale Winds a viable option. And then 10% extra damage for PvP. There's already Reddit post of people complaining how overpowered we're going to be, and I can't wait to get into an Arathi Basin tomorrow and do some damage. But as far as a PvE buff, I don't think it's quite enough damage, so it's walking on that line of it's a pretty decent buff for PvP, but PvE, we're still going to fall pretty short. So you can interpret Warcraft logs multiple ways. I just have it set for per second amounts over the range of last week, all percentiles, all bosses in Sunken Temple. And then if we go down to the Balance Druid, we're at 571.77 DPS overall. If we take that and we add our 10% damage, that brings us up to 628. So we move up above Ellie Shaman. But other classes like Shadow Priest are getting buffed. There's going to be a lot of changes even next week that they haven't even announced yet. So we're still going to be pretty far down on the meters unless they decide to nerf other classes, which I don't see them doing. But another thing that I was looking at was the max damage for all of these classes. There's 3,000, 4,000, well over 2,000, and then we get down to us bottom three, the LE Shaman, Balance Druid, Shadow Priest, and we're not even at 2k. So hopefully we see some other change in the following week that allows us to do extra damage. I would love to just see bosses be vulnerable to different schools of magic to help bring up those specs that aren't doing that well on the damage meter. But because LE Shaman and Balance Druid aren't doing well, if bosses were vulnerable to nature damage, then that would help us increase our DPS and not affect us in PvP. I don't know how you increase Shadow Priest damage as Shadow without affecting like a Warlock, but maybe Warlocks are all doing fire damage, so it wouldn't be that bad if bosses were vulnerable to Shadow damage. I don't know that spec, so I'll just leave it at that. It's great to see some changes coming to help Balance Druid perform a little bit better. And I'm even thinking ahead to next phase, phase 4. And it's already been teased that our tier bonus is going to affect insect swarms damage. So I wonder if we'll see any talents changed in the resto tree to somehow increase our DPS as well. If they could make Furor give us damage somehow by shape shifting into Moonkin form, we gain 20% extra damage for 20 seconds or something, and we would be power shifting our Moonkin form. Something there kind of makes the most sense so that we don't have to go through that whole thing where we're spending 5 useless points just to get down into Insect Swarm. But for that, we'll have to wait until phase 4. So thanks for stopping by. Let me know what you think about these changes.